2021 is coming soon, and with it, another new month of books. Hi everyone, my name is Holly, and today I'll be talking about over 20 new books of January 2021. There are so many books coming out in January. Like, January is the cool month all of the authors want to release their books in. So it was very hard to keep this list reasonable, doable for my sanity, and yet there are still over 20 books I'll be talking about today. If you're not subscribed, now is a great time to do so. I upload brand new videos every single week, and the best way to see them first is of course by ringing the notification bell. As always, I will be going in release date order, and I'll have the release date on the screen for you for every single book to make things easier. So let's begin on January 5th. There are 4 awesome sounding books coming out, and the first one is Persephone Station. This is a 2021 release that is very, very high on my TBR. In fact, I would love to squeeze it in actually for Medievalathon. It's the first book in a new space opera for fans of The Mandalorian and Cowboy Bebop. Like, come on, how more interesting can you get? It follows a character who is the captain to a mercenary team, and her line between honor and duty is very blurred. So it has everything a grimdark fan could want in a science fiction novel. The characters are outcast, they're heavily armed, and highly flawed. They face a powerful force on a suicide mission against all odds. It sounds like it's going to have a lot of intense and fast action. I just need it for the cool cover, if I'm being honest. Lore. This is another book that I actually wouldn't mind kind of squeezing into my January TBR. Basically, January is looking to be an amazing reading month. This is a new book coming from the author most known for the Darkest Mind series, which can be worrisome as someone who DNF'd the second book, but as a Greek mythology fan, this intrigues me. From early reviewers, they say this book has a Hunger Games vibe to it, but it's hunters killing gods to take their powers instead of teenagers. It has urban fantasy elements to it. In fact, some say it reminds them of the Mortal Instruments, so I'm very curious how all of this works together, but it's such a cool cover design nonetheless. While we're at it, let's talk about another mythology release, and I have City of the Plague God. This just sounds so up my alley, and it's a middle grade that hits all of my checkboxes. It's coming out of the Rick Riordan Presents imprint and follows a Muslim boy born and raised in New York City who teams up with a legendary hero to defeat the ancient god of plagues before the entire population of Manhattan is wiped out. Major Percy Jackson vibes, and it's a high-stakes contemporary adventure. This book was originally going to be released in the fall of 2020, but events led to it being pushed back. But it's pretty much here, and early reviews are great. It should be really fun. On the 8th, Blood Heir releases. This is an all-new novel set in the Kate Daniels world, which is a series that ended many years ago, and I've never personally read them myself, but this seems to be very highly anticipated by many, so I thought it deserved a spot on my list. And the cover has a badass lady on it, and we are all about badass ladies over here. It's an urban fantasy following characters from that universe. I really don't know much about it, but maybe one of you are fans and didn't know this existed, and I hope it helped. So we have quite a few books releasing on the 12th, and the first one is The Frozen Crown. The first book to a new YA fantasy series. The cover definitely gives me major Red Queen vibes. This is a political fantasy with an interesting twist on the usual magic system. The story follows a princess and her journey to free her country from an evil villain. It seems to have a lot of tropes going for it, but maybe with an added dose of freshness will liven things up a bit. Across the Green Grass Fields. Though this can be read as a standalone, this is the 6th book in the Wayward Children series, a very popular series in the book world, all very bingeable as well. These novellas bring a fresh angle to the classic trope of the portal fantasy, kind of Narnia-like, where children find doorways into other realms where they are often saviors or enact some great change, only to find their way back to Earth again years later. This one in particular follows a girl named Reagan, I believe. And there are supposed to be 7 books in this series, so there's one more coming. Doors of Sleep. So the synopsis begins with, what would you do if you woke up and found yourself in a parallel universe under an alien sky? This is the question Zax must answer every time he closes his eyes. That is so intriguing. This is coming from Angry Robot, another somewhat portal-sounding fantasy with magical doors and time travel. It's a science fiction novel, so it just has a lot going for it, and it seems like it's going to really mess with your your imagination. Even the cover gives the sense of this never-ending tunnel. So if you like adventures into different multiverses, this is definitely for you. We Lie with Death. I can't believe I'm announcing the sequel already because I feel like I just talked about the first one. Time sure does fly by. This series is for fans of dark fantasy. It was originally self-published and Orbit picked it up, and ever since then it's just been riding the waves of hype. People are loving this series. It's a rich Asian-inspired story of a brewing political conflict and 3 cultures that are drawn into it. Very brutal and very gory. Keep that in mind, kiddos. I'm so curious on what the 3rd book will look like because this cover is so rad. The Captive. We finally have a dystopian thriller book on this list. Though looking at it, you wouldn't think dystopian, but it's actually set in a near future America where a new drug causes an almost like Hatfields and McCoys type feud between 2 families. And though it's been on the shorter side, around 270 pages, it is apparently quite riveting. It's following Brooke, who is a cranberry farmer living with her husband and her 2 young daughters. Their farm is out on the edge of nowhere where they are safe. Brooke thinks anyways, from the horrors of her past. I don't know, it just sounds so interesting and I'm really curious about it. The Ruthless Lady's Guide to Wizardry. The design of this cover is so fire. They did a great job. This is a queer female-centric historical fiction fantasy. There's apparently a slow burn romance between 2 bodyguards who are witches. I'm not even into historical fiction, but this is the type of spark that could get me to read it. But these 2 ladies get recruited to protect a woman before her marriage, and it involves a heist and dark magic. It's full of snarky dialogue, an undead mouse skeleton called Buttons. This is immediately getting added to my January TBR the more I talk about it, honestly. Moving on to January 19th, a lot of books are coming out that day. And the first one, The Mask of Mirrors. Hey, a new release that I actually own. This is a high fantasy kind of heist novel, yet again, and it's the first to a new series. It's about an orphan who decides to con her way into a life of wealth and privilege, but soon realizes she may have bitten off more than she could chew as she navigates many layers of politics and family feuds. It's set in a Venice-style setting that sounds like a wonderful place to immerse yourself in. Man, I just want to read all of these books now. This list is so hype. Remote Control, a short sci-fi fantasy novella coming from Tor. It's written by a Nebula and Hugo Award winner, and the cover is absolutely gorgeous, and the story sounds really cool, taking place in Africa, where a young girl witnesses death and destruction and is suddenly gifted or cursed, however way you like to see it, with a strange green glow that kills anyone and anything in its path. It's definitely giving me superhero vibes, and the character has a fox as a sidekick as well and travels with her. If you're looking for a strange story that's probably going to get your mind thinking and your heart racing, check this one out. Cast in Firelight, the first book in a new YA fantasy duology called Wickery, where characters live in a world where magic is cast through 9 different colors. It's a story bursting with vibrancy and a color palette to get lost in. It's following 2 royal heirs trapped in an arranged marriage from a young age, but they have never seen each other and only write letters back and forth. These letters also contain a lot of competitiveness, as they are both touched with magic, and events unfold centered on that subject matter. I really think if you enjoy magic, maybe even a unique magic system mixed with romance, this one's probably going to be for you. Hall of Smoke. This is an adult fantasy with elements of Vikings and mythology. So it has a very Norse Roman-esque presentation, and it just sounds like it's going to be full of a lot of interesting layers. It's following a warrior priestess who has been banished by her goddess for disobeying her orders. While she is gone, her village is raided, leaving her to be the last alive. So she must win back her goddess's approval to secure herself a place in the afterlife where her loved ones now reside. Religious and spirituality sound like big aspects of the story. It seems like it's really going to be ambitious and a fresh take on high fantasy. The Forever Sea. First off, this cover just looks like a dream, and it's giving me a lot of Peter Pan vibes. Like, this ship is full of children who never age, but this is the first book in a new environmental epic fantasy series. Now, environmental fantasy is not not something I'm familiar with, but I can see it being a thing here, as this is set in a world full of magical ships that flow in endless grass fields, as the cover suggests. The story follows a Hearthfire keeper, that's very interesting, in her quest to find her grandmother and to find her own path. I'm very excited for this one. It sounds really original and something a fantasy nerd is going to love. Winterkeep. Oh, look, another author adding to a series that's been finished for almost 10 years. There's this trend of continuing older 2010 era YA fantasies like Shatter Me, Darkest Minds, Fire and Thorns, Hunger Games Twilight, and now Graceling. That's right, this is the 4th book being added on top of the Graceling trilogy. I bet you haven't heard that series in a while. Obviously, many fans are highly anticipating this, but many are hesitant, which is understandable. This takes place 4 years after the events of Bitter Blue, and a new land has been discovered. And the closest nation to it is Winterkeep, and in Winterkeep, we follow the daughter of a powerful scholar, and she's apparently the key to everything. I hope this is really good for those of you out there who are picking this up this month. A complicated love story set in space. So this is a sci-fi that is also a romantic comedy, and I just had to include it here because though it's clearly a romance, which isn't something I like, it sounds so fun. We follow 3 teenagers after they wake up aboard a spaceship, not knowing how they got there. As they face life-threatening scenarios at every turn, 2 of the boys, Noah and DJ, navigate a complicated love connection. Like, the story has me so confused, which makes me even more intrigued, especially when space opera and aliens are mentioned in reviews. Like, how could this all fit together? I need to know. Tell me down below if you're curious as well. And then we have Wench. If there was ever a book to read during Medieval-thon, this is it. This is a feminist fantasy following Tanya, a tavern wench, and she's incredibly proud of all the work she does, cooking, cleaning, serving, and dealing with customers who patronize her guardian's tavern. Well, unfortunately, when her guardian dies, the tavern is taken by the queen, and Tanya fights her way through magicians, corruption, thieves to get it back. This is a book that's definitely going to implant a message in its wake, women showing strength and body positivity and doing what they think is right with no apology. It sounds really cool. A house at the bottom of a lake. Josh Mallerman is mostly known for Bird Box, which I loved, and he's releasing another horror thriller book that's very on the short side about 2 teenagers who are on their first date. So lovely. Until they are on a boat in the middle of a lake and they discover something dark beneath them. This also has some dark fantasy elements added to it, and it's only 100 pages or so, so something that you can read very quickly, and early reviews seem to be pretty positive. I'll definitely be reading it. A couple books are coming out on the 26th, and we have Wings of Ebony. This is a stunning debut fantasy about a girl living in Houston who suddenly discovers her godly ancestry. This is a book that I just need on my shelf for the cover. Like, that's all there is to it. It's so cool, and the story itself, a young black heroine's wild quest for justice that teeters between realistic and fantastical. This is definitely a release to look out for, and a new voice from an author I think is going to stand out. And finally, we have Brother Red. This is very, very high on my TBR. In fact, I've been dying to read this book since it was first announced. First off, it has the coolest fantasy cover. The simplicity of it is great. And it's a standalone, which Adrian Selby just seems to like writing because his previous book, Winter Road, was also a standalone. This one starts off so intriguing. It's following a character who is hired to protect this trade caravan, but she soon discovers a dead body hidden inside one of the barrels, and it creates this deep mystery. I cannot wait to read it. I can't wait to see what happens, and hopefully it intrigues you as well. So that's going to be it for today. What are you reading in January 2021? It's a new year. I know something from this list had to pique your interest. Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. If you like this video, click like and subscribe if you haven't. Follow me on all my socials. They'll be on the screen for you. And as always, thank you so very much for watching this video. And until we meet again, happy reading.